Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And today, I can tell you, we're going to have so much fun. I had to make sure to set the timer because we'd be going on forever, because we're going to have so much fun discussing a very important topic. So please join me in welcoming Andrea Austin to our program today. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. So glad to be here. Excited and nervous all at the same time.
Oh, no need to be nervous. This is always great fun. So Let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we'll dive into this. So Andrea Austin, or Ann for short, is the co-founder of My Conscious Wellness and Love Evolution, which is leaders in the consciousness and alternative wellness space. Throughout all aspects of what they create and share is to introduce love-based economics or sacred economics back into the world to make change available to all. So this is so fascinating. Like I said, I can't wait to discuss this, but I always love knowing a little bit about my guests and how they got to where they were, because you've taken a much varied path to get to where you are today. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Thanks. So that's a great way to say, how do I end up talking about this topic? So my background, interestingly, started in business probably around the age of 17.
Okay.
And then ended up attending the University of Toronto, getting a major in commerce and economics. And the topics always fascinated me from the day I started. And then I decided to get a professional designation. So I was a CPA or a CA, depending on how you looked at it. It's now called CPA, with probably one of the largest international accounting firms in the globe, called KPMG. And I worked my way up through senior management for about 22 years within that organization. And my focus for a good chunk of that, interestingly, was on taxation. So I actually had a degree or a specialization in corporate and personal taxation, and actually taught it at the University of Toronto for a number of years, and really loved that separate side of my part. And it was interesting because I kind of made my way through the organization, got involved for a number of years, even in the nonprofit industry from a taxation perspective, joined boards to be able to use my skill set differently. And I always found the people and the business part quite fascinating, but never felt called within that organization to lead in that way. It was like a little part of me said, no, not here. And so I did that for, like I said, 22 years. But a bit of my own personal story is physically struggled quite a bit from the age of 18. So I was like this superpower on the one side. And then on the other side, couldn't quite always keep my body in check, one might say. So from the age of 18, had a number of issues, yada, yada, yada. So it was quite an interesting world to be in this business world and then have this other stuff going on. And kind of always wondered what was wrong with me. Let's just go there, right? I felt like I have it all, right? I have the 6-digit business or job that I always wanted. I worked for a great organization, great people, but couldn't quite find my place. So, to sum it up, in the Turks and Caicos, if you haven't been, you need to go. I had an out of body experience, which really surprised the crap out of me. It was like I was hovering and seeing myself in this kitchen, in this place. And it was like I was yelling at the top of my soul, are you happy?
And the answer was?
No. And so what was interesting was in that time, a lot of things showed up and lined up to tell me to take a break.
Okay.
And that scared me significantly because I built this whole foundation of my life on the house, the dog, the cottage, the great job.
That's our identity.
I identified so strongly that it took me a little bit, but really not that long, because once I make decisions, it tends to be quick. And what was interesting is I made a decision in June. I don't know what year. I should probably be able to quote. In whatever year that was, and by November, I had mapped out and left my 22-year position. Took a 1-year sabbatical, gave myself the opportunity to go back if it felt right. But I think within 3 months, I knew I wasn't going back. And so the question became, what's next in my journey? And I was about 42 at the time, I think. So I started exploring. I had a whole lot of fun exploring different modalities, especially because my physicality had struggled for so long. I tried alternative modalities. I started exploring what some might call the spiritual world, the consciousness space, whatever that was. And I was tremendously graced with a lot of crash course and education in whatever that means to others, but one might say spirituality, soul, consciousness. And what was intriguing was on April Fool's Day, 2012, I went to a trade show, the Toronto Yoga Show. I'd been doing yoga for about 9 years, and there was something about that show that told me I needed to be there. And so I went in on the Sunday, which happened to be April Fool's Day. And within the first 5 minutes, found what is now my divine partner out of 200 vendors. And he was sharing a unique technology that the mind couldn't understand, but there was a part of my being that just said, yes, I need to be here. And so within meeting him, we began talking about consciousness and earth and people, and everything we talked about just made so much sense to me. And I thought, oh my God, where have you been my whole life? Right. And what's intriguing is, so we've journeyed together for the last 9 years, sharing my conscious wellness and tools and technologies and so on. But what always came back to me was my passion for business. My passion,
and those worlds seem almost opposite.
So far, and that's what I thought. So for a lot of years, it was like I'd forgotten that side of me. Not really, but it was like, why did I have 25 years of this, and now I'm in this, and how do these two collide? And about a year and a half ago, I said to him, there's something missing here on both sides of because if you call them two sides of the world, let's just put them in two buckets for now. There's something missing. My sense was they were to come together. And what was interesting is about a couple years ago, a book showed up in my world, and it was just kind of like that little niggle. It's called Sacred Commerce. I can quote their last names, Rowan Bromwell and Iman. I can't do his last name quite, but anyway, I started going through it, and I was like, oh. And what it was just, we could call it a story, but they were sharing the background of what role business played in Egyptian times. And I went, oh, this makes so much more sense to me. And in those times, they were called the merchant priests, meaning that it was a full training of understanding consciousness, energy, human and emotional intelligence, business, and they were all mired into one. And these were the leaders of communities that helped communities and infrastructure and even politics move forward. And there was something in that really spoke to me. So that was kind of the, oh, I get it moment. And then over the last year and a half, a number of works and books and things have shown up to help me begin to glue the pieces, including a book on nonprofits written by Dan Pallotta or John McKay, in conscious capitalism, the leader of Whole Foods markets.
Mm-hmm.
And even in that book, he starts to talk about the spirit of business, meaning that there's something inside of us, which I've known since the day I was born, that each one of us wants to come and make a difference in this world.
Right.
But what I've sensed as I'm reading is that some of that got lost in the business world.
Right.
And business has a tremendous capacity to help people, to influence people. And all of a sudden, these two worlds started to collide. And so I've had an interesting opportunity within our own organization to experiment, and will continue probably till the day I die, and experience what it means to insert conscious capitalism into a mindset or a spirituality type business. But what excites me more is to be able to start simplifying some of these concepts. And so I figure if you can teach taxation at the University of Toronto and simplify that, because even the accountants hate taxation, I will tell you that, then I can do anything.
True.
And I used to love that part of my life. I would love trying to just help people understand in the taxation world what the principles were and how they applied and why they applied in a practical way. And I see myself doing that going forward from a business perspective, but also from a spirituality perspective, and combining the essence of those two worlds. Because I know that business influences, and it can be in a magnificent way. It can also be in a really interesting way. I never use really good or bad, but I can see the power. And so as I've started to read some of the works of these amazing, amazing people, I start to realize that there is a mindset that is coming to open this next wave of conscious capitalism. And I'm excited to be part of it in my own way.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and I love this because it's funny. People have started, you know, like you said, people have started talking about this, and, you know, and that companies have to be more concerned about whatever it is, the environment, their employees, all those various things. And then in the next breath, people are like, those darn millennials with all these, right? You know, and maybe it's that they're actually the ones talking about it, but it is something that is so important. You know, and you know, I mentioned the fact that it seems like they're, you know, being caring, being loving, kind, all of those things seems very different than the business world, you know, and we've always been told that business is business, you know, and you know, we use the terms cutthroat business, all of these, you know, various things, and that, you know, the ultimate is making money, screwing the competition, all of those various things. And that, you know, if you're bringing the fluffy stuff into it, there's something wrong. And of course, the opposite is actually what's true. You know, we need to be bringing that emotion in.
Agree. Somebody would label that as the story of business. And what I'm starting to realize is the power that stories have. And what I'm realizing as I've been reading and reflecting now is that people are looking for the story of purpose. So we can say those darn millennials,
right?
But this is not going to stop. And I know that to my core. People do care at our heart.
And once we started thinking about it, it doesn't go away.
No, it doesn't. And so what I'm challenging people is to change the story of business, because what I recognized is, and like you said, is there's this really heavy, dark, almost energy around business, and a projection that it's all in it for the money. But when you start actually talking, even in C-suite, to the people who are leading businesses, money's not at the core.
Right.
It's about helping people, making a difference, facilitating change in whatever form they're choosing. And that really is the story of business that needs to be told. And from my perspective, we need to stop perpetuating the heavy or the dark that exists, right? And start shining the light, however you want to phrase that, right? On what business can do and what it is doing, and stop sugarcoating and trying to fit into that cutthroat capitalism story that's no longer going to hold true.
Right.
Yeah, there's a great story, a book called Elevated Economics, written by Richard Steele. I attended a Harvard Business Club event, and he's actually showing the data behind the perception that tree huggers don't last. And it was a great presentation because wait till he puts love into that mix. I'll have so much fun. But he actually is showing that the data is showing that there is this desire to do good in the world, and it can and is starting to become reflected. And what I see in this next gen, the millennials in particular, is they're demanding it.
Right.
And what's intriguing is he actually talks about the statistics of the millennials are the one that are about to inherit the money from the baby boomers. And so I laugh because I'm like, hang on to your shorts, people. Because when that money passes from one generation, because it's, the largest wealth in human history is sitting with those baby boomers in the moment from that class perspective, it's going to move to a generation that is demanding that energy or that consciousness or awareness or passion or purpose, however you want to frame it. Because when you look at John McKay's work around Whole Foods, it was the entire purpose was to look at business from a broader perspective, right? And not drive it from the greed and scarcity and lack mentality that has been often inserted into humanity, and believing that's where we need to come from.
Right.
So it's quite fascinating.
And businesses obviously have to make money. I'm
not in debate. There's power in that.
Yeah, and so and I even tell people, nonprofits don't mean no profit. And even if you're talking about bartering and things like that, I mean, you still have to have something. We have bills we have to pay, we have employees we have to pay, we have vendors we have to pay, all of these various things. But there are ways to do it differently. And I think that's where people are really starting to say, hey, you need to think about how in the heck are you treating your employees? And you mentioned that you don't talk about things good and bad. The pandemic is, I think, a great example of that. There were so many things, and still are. Yes, there were horrible things that happened. I mean, certainly the loss of life is the biggest, but the loss of business, all those things. But look at all the good things that came out of it. But I think many of the people, especially those who are now working from home and going, ooh, I like this, because they're having a better quality of life. And I think that's the big objection that people are having when their companies are saying, hey, we want you to come back. It's like, nope. I like working at home, and more importantly, I get my work done. So, why do I have to go sit there in your office? But I think the pandemic has really made people think very differently about a lot of things.
Oh, 100% agree. Because you could say like that the pandemic is a bad thing or a good thing, but what it's really done is drive change. And I think we're going to see the ripple of that effect for at least 10 years.
Right.
I have a simple example. A group that we connected with received a 3-year budget for the first time ever to focus on mental health in the First Nations, and to do it significantly different. And so, like anything, right, it drives great change. And, my simple statement would say, fantastic. Now let's drive it through love and compassion, love and kindness, which I think the pandemic has also helped us be more compassionate to each other, be more understanding, and give each other the space that we need to work through in however this has impacted us in our lives.
Right.
And there's a real beauty in that.
Right. And for those who haven't been that way, It just always amazes me when people are nasty and cranky and grumpy and, all of those. And I have people say that I'm Pollyanna. I'm like, well, I'd rather be that way than nasty, cranky, and grumpy.
Me too.
But, I look at them and I think, how can you go through life like that? I mean, that's just one of the things, but I think, it really, there's and I think for now, a bigger split, and I think we're going to have an even bigger split for a while. So this is kind of a scary thing, but yeah, you can't tell me that love's not going to win. I mean, and all of those various things. So, I think that's going to happen, but it really, I always laugh at the people who say, I can't wait for things to get back to normal. And I just look at them like, you can't seriously think that we're going to go back to, say, January of 2020.
Nope.
Too many things have happened. People did like working from home. We like ordering online, all of these various things. And, I discovered when they told me, hey, lady, you have cancer. Yeah, life never goes back to normal after that. And so you just adapt, and I tell people it's my normal. It's your new normal. And, and you go on, I think we've got at least another year of really trying to figure stuff out. It's because now companies can go back to hybrid, or, they're starting to, schools, all of those various things. And it's going to take a year for people to really figure out, okay, and I do, I'm a firm believer that kids need to be in school, kindergarten through college. I mean, they need to be with other, for aside from anything else, I'm a big band geek, band, choir, sports, all of those things that you have to be together for. But, and we, I miss people. I miss the networking. I miss things like that. But, we are figuring out, okay, well, this is how we do it differently. We all should have bought stock in Zoom a long time ago. And just the variety of things, because, but I think that is part of this whole process of, we're all going through this and thinking, how can we make this better? It got really pretty ugly there for a while, and it still may go back to that every once in a while, but we really are thinking, how can we make it better?
Yeah. And that's the best part when I look at businesses with purpose, where their purpose is making it a win-win for all. I think we're going to start seeing some huge successes and some huge wins. Because when my sense is that people are getting tired of the cutthroat scarcity, lack, bottom line mentality, and please, I making money, I'm all over it. It's the
we
power
like
of
money. Money's good.
Well, because money has changed the globe, right? We're able to connect and help people and exchange energy right through money from anywhere in the globe now. Like, it's an unprecedented, beautiful time, right? When you used to have to pass coconuts, you could only do it across the street, right?
And then they went, well, I don't like coconuts. Whoa.
I don't want coconuts anymore. So now I get beautiful choice. But money is the byproduct, not the driver. Right. And that's the interesting part. And so there's a real command, just like COVID, to do things differently, is what I'm sensing and seeing it. Interestingly, even in the nonprofit world. Right. So I've been reading this gentleman's book, and even in the first chapter, I'm like, because his challenge to the world, which I find is so fascinating, is we've become so regimented in the nonprofit world. It's like we've compartmentalized. Well, we can do good over here in the nonprofit world, but they can't have a lot of money, and they're restricted on how they spend it. And so there's a whole even negativity on them even having excess money. And then we go over to the business world and we go, oh, those bastards are cutthroat.
Yeah, you can't be fluffy over there. No emotions allowed. No crying allowed.
Like, it's just hilarious. And so I've been starting to read some of the history on how this happened and how we compartmentalized, specifically even in North America and the US specifically. And it's really fascinating to me because I recognize that there was some maybe good intentions several hundred years ago when we created some of these infrastructures, but it's time for change.
Right.
And how to make that change will be quite fascinating story.
Right. Yeah. I worked for the American Cancer Society, which is a large nonprofit. I mean, we had profit sharing, but it's always been fun to have discussions with people when they say, well, anybody who works there or for any nonprofit, and especially the CEO, should make pittance.
Right.
And, and I look at them and say, but they're competing in the business world. We need them to have that business knowledge. And that means you have to pay them. Now, you're not going to pay somebody that's even the head of a major nonprofit the same thing that Jeff Bezos makes, right? That's just not going to happen. But you have to make it worth their while so that they don't go back into the for-profit world. And I loved working for nonprofits, but I needed more money. I mean, let's be honest about it. There's only so much good in our heart that we can do. And so it needs to be compensated better because, of course, when your employees are happy and your volunteers and all of those various things, then you can do more good. And that's the thing that people seem to not get is, there's nonprofit. I mean, there's a whole bunch of legalese that goes along with that term, but, we need to recognize that they have to have money to do what they do. And that also means compensating employees and things like that. Now, does the CEO need to drive a Mercedes? Maybe not, but, you still need to have things where, so that they can compete.
Well, and what I'm playing with, who knows, might not happen in my lifetime, Deb, but we're just going to go with it, is to potentially see the merger of both realities into one.
Right.
So that we're no longer distinguishing profit or nonprofit.
Right.
We just simply measure, vote, and support and do, right, without limitation. And whether that can happen in my lifetime, one never knows, but I can see starting to plant those seeds differently because a number of years ago, my partner Bill and I, when we were looking at our organization, I said to him, anytime I mention the word that I'm in business and there's a holistic element, people look at me cross-eyed because they can't recognize.
Those two don't match.
Right. So then I said, well, especially in Canada, the rules under nonprofits are far more even more stringent than they are in the US.
Interesting.
And so I thought about, when I looked back at my training, whether to organize as a nonprofit, because that's actually how we function. But it was interesting because I couldn't do it because of the restrictions, but also because I realized that when people look at a nonprofit, sometimes they don't take you seriously either. Or sometimes
you're the fluffy tree huggers.
Right. Or you're the pity party. Like I can't. And so it's interesting to watch because I'll experiment with people. I'll say, oh, I'm in business. And then I'll say, oh, I run a nonprofit. And then I'll watch how they respond. And it's interesting to see how we translate both of those through the perception of our reality. And yet they're all trying, you could see them as all trying to do good in the world.
Right.
And I'd love to break down some of those barriers for people and get them to start recognizing that money is money, energy is energy, and vote where you want to be and make it what you want it to be.
Right.
And that can happen on both sides.
Yeah. I love the thought of merging them together and just doing.
Doing. I love that. I'm taking it, Deb.
Yeah. And because they call them nonprofits basically for tax purposes, and lobbying and all sorts of other things. But, it's funny because then we also, when we're contributing, whether it's our time or our money, it's like, well, am I going to get a tax write-off? And so we're concerned about that too. And it's like, I just should want to know that my money and my time is going to go toward good. And they shouldn't have to basically be bribing me to say you're going to do this.
Exactly. 100% agree. Yeah.
Well,
and I wonder where that purpose comes into mind, right? Because there is a lot of love and compassion. And let's use the American Cancer Society, right, as an organization to help humanity overcome, this hurdle, right, in its history. And I always hold the vision that one day your grandchildren might say to you, "What's cancer?"
Right?
Yeah. They might never know. And so no matter what organization, I think that purpose is really important, and to align, our passion, our heart, and our time by aligning with the organizations that meet the purpose that we want to support.
Right. Yeah. And the big companies, they do have those altruistic things. I think Walmart's mission is to bring, it's something about, and I should have looked this up, about, being able to provide goods and services to people everywhere. Something, and of course they know their market. I mean, they're not selling to the Mercedes-Benz crowd, but their goal really was to be less expensive so that people who couldn't afford it could afford to buy things. Obviously they made lots and lots of money off of it, but and that is kind of the thing, is if sometimes when things go together correctly, you do benefit, you make that
100%.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that.
We've somehow made that out to be evil.
Right.
It's absolutely insane, because I agree. Walmart, whether you like them or not, doesn't matter. They if that was their mission, I'm going to do some research now.
I know somewhere I'm vaguely remembering this,
because it's funny, people go out with an intention of doing good in the world. They come up with a purpose, they want to make a difference, and when they make piles of money, it's like the human race turns on them and says, "You're bad." And I say, that's BS.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah. Well, there's been a big story in the news recently here in the States that, and somebody did a study, a report, one of those things, that the billionaires in the United States, so Bezos and Musk and all of those guys, pay virtually no personal income tax. And people are like, ah! Well, of course they pay a lot of other taxes. I mean, there's all those things, but and in very small print, and the guy reading the story in his very muffled little voice says, they're doing it legally, and so they're just, I mean, they're smart enough to take advantage of how they're investing and things like that. But yeah, it's like, we want to penalize them for making all that money. Now, I think what really, and to come back to what we were talking about before, what we really look at is, okay, you are the billionaire, the millionaire. What are you doing with it? And when we see that, they're just sitting on their piles of money, then we're like, maybe not so much. But when you see people that, I mean, I was talking with somebody the other day, Bill Gates. Yes, he's kind of stepped in it a bit recently, but the Gates Foundation, I'm not quite sure what its name is right now, but
I've heard that rumor.
Yeah. It has brought a lot of good to people. Right. And he and I think Bezos is the same. Their kids will not inherit. It's all, and Zuckerberg is one too, that, they're not going to leave their children destitute. I mean, we're not saying, and that's the other thing, people are like, oh, they're not going to get anything. No, they're just not getting the gazillions. But yeah, their money will go back to do good. And we see, all the time with celebrities, with sports figures, when they, are doing good things, we're like, oh, that's really good.
Well, and I think that's one of the things at the beginning that I think the story of business, and I almost named today's podcast that needs to change, meaning that I think it's equally important for us as a human race to advertise, let's call it, where that flow is going.
Right.
Because one of the things I've started to, just off the side, because of my economics background, start to explore something called flow economics. And so what that means in my preliminary, we'll talk again in 10 years, Deb, is as I watch and study this, is let's take the organizations you just spoke of. They go out, they like a Walmart, and they say, okay, this is what we want to do is help get things into the hands of people that might not otherwise be able to afford it. And they make a ton of money. And so the question is, what do they do with that flow? Because as many would say, there's this whole generation of individuals who are sitting on more money than their parents ever had. Right.
And just, could even conceive of.
Right. And that there's no reason that has to stop. But in the flow or the natural order of the universe, one might say, we were meant to flow it back into the system. That's true of energy, right? And if energy's damned, right, in the human form or in a river, right, it's going to explode. And so one of the things I've been reflecting on is there a dam right now in the economic system or in the monetary world that needs to flow?
We've stopped the process.
The flow, correct. Because I think there's another part of the process that we've missed from an economic perspective. And I get it for some of us, if you use, families as an example, we have a fear. I get it. Once we get to retirement age, that, at what point is enough? How do we know that we're going to have enough until the day we die? And there's a whole freaking fear-based get it system around that, and yet that's new to these generations because we didn't have that money before.
No.
And so it's interesting to me to look at that when you talk about the process. Is I wonder if part of it is to be releasing the dams and trust that what goes around comes around, even within these organizations or within our homes and our own economic systems. And that's where sacred economics comes into it, because at the core, it's all about flow, right? We flow into this world and then we flow out at some point, right? And that includes money.
Yeah. Well, and it makes me wonder, is that why Bitcoin has, and that's beyond my scope of knowledge, but yeah, this whole new currency, that has been started. It's, and is it real money? I mean, the radio station that I listened to was talking about the fact that, you still, for the most part, can't go into Starbucks and say, here's my Bitcoin, I want to buy a cup of coffee. You might have gazillions of dollars in Bitcoin, but you can't do anything with it unless you're dealing with other Bitcoin people. I mean, and I know there's that whole process, but yeah, and I don't know if that's why Bitcoin, if that's maybe the way that this flow is shifting to, I don't know. It is going to be interesting to see how this all comes out, because of course the interesting part about that is it's worldwide, it's not country specific currency.
Yeah, it's one of the books that I've been reading, Sacred Economics by Charles Eisenstein. He does a really good, if you're up for a deeper read, on the history of money, which is so fascinating to me. Like, it's a total turn on. And what's intriguing is he's talking hundreds and thousands of years ago in the development of the monetary system. And what's interesting, and he challenges it in the book, and it makes a lot of sense to me, is a lot of our monetary systems now are really based on fiction, interestingly. And so when I look at Bitcoin or any other type of, because you're right, it's new to me as well. I'm 53, so of course we're used to a little bit more of the other way. But a number of years ago, I was almost like niggled a little bit to start exploring it. And so I'm just kind of watching and seeing what happens and learning a little bit more. But what I feel is there's a pressure from a global perspective to do money differently. And whether Bitcoin plays a role or any other currency, it's intriguing because we could get to the point where there is a unilateral global currency that I literally walk into Starbucks and say, swipe my phone, and the coins just move, because it really is just numbers and a story.
Right.
And so when we talk about changing the story of business and changing the story of money, I often feel that some of those coins are attempting to change the story and the energy and the way it moves, right? To truly create potentially a global economy,
right?
Which, when we still hold to some of the older stories of how economies should function, there can be a push and a pull, right? As to no, we can, or no, we can't.
Right.
So,
you know, and what supports it? I mean, you know, the US dollar, you used to, you know, now not in my lifetime, I don't think, maybe, but I could take my little money and trot down to the bank and say, I want silver instead, because it was silver backed. You know, and of course, you know, that happens in other countries too, but you know, but you also have the thing with, you know, countries go, well, we're just going to print more money, you know, and it doesn't matter. It's, you know, it's every country does it, you know, and then that does weird wonkadoodle things to inflation, which is way beyond my scope of knowledge. But yeah, it's, you know, it's very interesting that we're just going to make more, you know, and so it's, I guess it comes back to before, you know, if you wanted more, you know, you grew more coconuts, and that was great until people didn't want coconuts.
Well, and that's what I ponder sometimes. So if you look at the history of money, what's happened in the business world is that foundation of that story has been very much based in lack and scarcity. So if we tied it to the silver as we used to, then there's only so much of that on the planet. And therefore we can only do so much.
Right.
And
we couldn't make more silver.
Right. And so it's intriguing because the power of humanity's creation, let's call it that, to create things is limitless. And so we've used this monetary system to restrict it rather than let it be limitless. And so I'll often say to people, what if what you could do was limitless and money didn't bind what you could do? Because, you know, there is a point from a personal level, we only personally need so much, right?
Yeah.
So what if all of that was taken care of? What would you do? And that's where this limitless capacity, whether it's tied to money or business or nonprofits, it's irrelevant, is we haven't fully unleashed, I feel, that power because we've often limited its capacity because we say it has to be X, Y, and Z. There has to be this, or there has to be that. And I think, well, I know that that's not true. We do have unbridled, limitless capacity. So it'll be exciting to see where this next generation takes us. If we start to loosen the binds of what's limiting them and start to put this conscious capitalism or sacredness or hope or kindness, however you want, love, whatever words you want to use, back into the power of what we can create and do.
Right. Well, let's talk about that more. Your company is called Love Evolution, right? Did I get that right? Yes, Love Evolution. And you really, you know, you and your partner, Bill, some point I'm going to have to virtually meet him. But
You'd love him.
You know, you talk about bringing love into businesses. And so talk more about that, because, you know, and like I said, I'm the Pollyanna. I'm the person that says, you know, we need to smile at people. We need to do all of these things. Does that mean I don't get grumpy? No, ask my husband. But you know, yeah, you know, so talk to us more about the company and the philosophy behind it. See, I didn't call it a business. See, now I don't know what to call it.
Oh, I don't even care. It is a company. Well, really, I look at it like an organization. I don't know what flavor it's to take.
Right.
And Love Evolution only popped up about a year and a half ago. So it's a bit of an experiment. People can join the discussion, as I call it, at theloveexperiment.ca, because it's just in its birthing stage. But love is an energy. Okay. It's not the way that we make it out in the Hollywood movies between a man and a woman.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. There's a beautiful connection between people that I could say is love. But love is just an exploration. It's creation. It's expansion. But the reason I use the word evolution is because a lot of the foundation for our current societal structures are based on historical stories. So if you look at an economics, there's a really strong economics theory that's still taught in university that all humans are greedy. There's one. And I don't agree with that. And two, that, you know, I think it was the early 1800s, there was a whole economic theory that said that planet Earth would never live. There wasn't enough resources to go around. And now there's 7 billion people. And when you start to look at some of the stats, yes, we still have poverty and things to solve, but for the most part, right, we've come a long way. And so when I look at love and the evolution of love, all I'm talking about is unwinding some of the subconscious fear-based stories that are still driving our creations and working through letting go of those beliefs so that we can create from a place of love. And that to me is kindness, compassion, contribution to the planet, contribution to each other, all those sorts of things. That is the core foundation of who we are. But these stories and experiences, understandably, right? If you look at the patterns of what people have been through, right? War, starvation, depression, and you look, those stories are still playing out, even when our reality is not that anymore. And so the reason we called it Love Evolution was to get people to understand that as a species, it's time for us to evolve past the fear and scarcity. And my conscious wellness, we kind of segregated it. They're really the same. Is some of the tools that have shown up to help us we call it subtle energy. Our human form is made up of energy fields to help release a little more easily and naturally some of those fears that are stored and passed down from lineage to lineage.
Right.
And that's what we mean by love evolution and my conscious wellness.
Right. You know, and you know, looking at your website, of course, the core is how are we feeling about ourselves?
Yes.
You know, and you know, how, I mean, we've seen it obviously with the pandemic, with, you know, so many people who, you know, when they had to go into isolation, you know, it was very scary for them. You know, and granted, there's a lot of reasons for that, because we are social creatures, and nobody was bothered by being, you know, stuck inside more than me. But, you know, I think part of it is, you know, these expectations that we have of ourselves, you know, and from the stories, you know, that the men will, you know, get the you know, they go out, they earn the money, you know, they do all those things. So if they don't, there's something wrong. You know, and you know, or and it was funny, I saw something the other day where somebody, and it just whizzed past my face really fast, and so I wasn't able to see it, but it was a man saying, I will think less of my wife if she chooses to go back to work. And I thought, okay, there's a lot wrong with that statement, from a variety of perspectives, but, you know, but that comes back into our stories, you know, that and I, like I said, it just went in and out. So I don't know, did they have kids that, you know, he thought she should be taken care of, or, you know, all these various things. We definitely saw during the pandemic that so many women, because the kids were home, had to leave their jobs, you know, and you know, but we tell ourselves all these stories that, you know, even if it's just that I have to be the president of the company, I have to get the promotion, I have to drive the fancy car, you know, all of these things. And if we don't, it comes back to wrong, right? There's something wrong if we're not. And then when you see people who don't do that and they're happy, you're like, what the heck?
Absolutely, my love. I built my whole life on that. So I did all the things that I thought were going to make me happy, and then I wasn't, and thought there was something wrong with me.
Right.
And so those are the stories. And you are correct. At the core of love evolution is strengthening the capacity to love ourselves first. We've been taught quite significantly to love others first. and ourselves last.
Mhm.
And that's like trying to build a house on a foundation
Right.
that constantly falls over
Mhm.
when the next windstorm
Right.
blows through.
Yeah.
Because if we don't build this house, then it doesn't matter what
Right.
else we
It's like
create.
taking care of our own health, and we have to take care of ourselves. I love the, and I'm certainly not taking credit for this, the whole analogy of the airplane. When the masks drop down, you put yours on first. Yeah. Because you can't take care of somebody else if you're going, right? So yeah, take care of yourself first. And it is so interesting to see how these things evolve, and the stories that we tell ourselves, because they are changing. And I think, the millennials, bless their little hearts, are saying, wait a minute, this can be different. We're not going to do it that way. And for everybody who complains about the millennials, we raised them. They didn't just come up with these ideas on their own. So that's what I find very interesting about this. But yeah, it is, we do have to be happy with ourselves before anything else can come. And is that complicated? Yes, it is. And all of those various things. But I think that's, it really does, that, and it's scary, because those stories are there in our heads. And, if you're thinking, oh my gosh, I hate my job, but I have to feed my family. Okay, well, then it's not quit now. It's, what do you do to make those changes?
Yep. 100% agree. And when we go back to the beginning of this discussion, I think that's what started to show up in my reality was I had created so much to create and not just feed my family, but far more than that, create an abundant life, right? The trips and the vacations and the cottage and the dog, thinking that was going to fill my reality, that I ended up almost killing myself. Not literally this way, but physically.
Well,
and
you mentioned that you had health issues.
And so it's intriguing to see that when we're willing to at least set the intention that we want to unravel that, because so often I hear that I need to build a business, make $1 million, and then I'll be happy. Or I met one mother who told her daughter, who hates her job, and the daughter's 22. And you know what she said to her? That's okay, baby. You only need to hang on till you're 45, and then you'll have pension, and then you can stay. Then you'll be happy. And I almost myself because I went, oh God, don't delay happiness. And so there is this synergy coming where if we give ourselves permission to be happy, make money, and then create a business from that place, rather than constantly feeling and postponing it, then, and that takes courage for some people. It feels like a big leap of faith, right? Then we will be supported. And I know that I've lived it for the last 9 years.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny. There's a television commercial from long ago. And I don't know if you had it in Canada, but it was the little man getting up at 4:00 in the morning, got to make the donuts. And he worked for like Dunkin' Donuts or something like that. And every morning he would get up, got to make the donuts. And it was 4 a.m. I remember that was the whole big thing. He's getting up at 4, got to make the donuts. And, we still might need to make the donuts, but then that's where people, maybe they do need to volunteer, or, it's not an either or, it's not black or white. It's how can we find ways to do things that, and I'm just gonna be, to feed our souls. And I think
I was going to say that. So thank you. Fulfill our souls, baby. Yep. And that's why I used to teach, because I loved that it would fulfill my soul. And I actually, when I broke 9 years ago, and away from the industry for a while, I thought about teaching, and then I went, no, there's not enough excitement in that for my soul anymore. And so you're right. What's happened is this interesting business organization, whatever it is, that has many facets, that is now feeding my soul. And it's like the life force is coming back in me. And I don't think we recognize that. So we can delay that part of our lives for a really long time. But I think what we'll witness is things will get heavier, we'll get more tired, we'll get more sick.
Right.
Because we're not feeding our soul. And you're right, it can start in small streams. It can be an art project, a nonprofit initiative. It doesn't matter what it is. You can have the job at McDonald's to pay the bills if that works for you. Like I know a young man that's put himself through university and made more money than his mother at McDonald's.
Yep.
And it's fed him because he's now feeding his soul. It's not an either or. It's learning to do what that is. And that's an evolution. Hence the love evolution is trying to focus on what feeds and nurtures the soul so we can live a happy and robust life rather than making it about the almighty buck, which very much I was trained to do by my father, by the organizations that I worked with and all those things. And we forgot about the nutrient of the soul. Yeah.
Right.
That's awesome.
You know, and companies can be doing that all the time with their employees.
Absolutely.
You know, when I worked in corporate America, I worked for a company called ING. They've changed names, but large financial company, one of the largest in the world. And we had a huge philanthropic volunteerism program. And, you know, they've changed since then, you know, but, you know, things happen. But, you know, it really was. I mean, that was critical to employees, but we also used it as a recruiting tool to say, you know, you can have a day every month to go volunteer and you will be paid. You know, all of these various things. And, you know, people were like, oh, you're giving them a day off. They're coming back with their souls enriched and able to work better. And I think that's the thing that so many people forget, you know, and we see that with companies still. I mean, you know, where they do encourage, you know, we're going to go do Habitat for Humanity. We're going to go do this. We're going to go do that. You know, and giving their employees that opportunity to be able to do good things. And then it helps the company. So hello, then you make more money.
Absolutely. And that's where we're coming a time where we're not going to compartmentalize our lives, right? It isn't family here, and I'm going to call it philosophical or philanthropic here. We are whole beings, and we're not meant to compartmentalize ourselves. So, you know, put on the power suit, I call it, and show up, but disregard all the other things in my life. And it is that fragmentation, one might say, of the soul that I think is really causing some of the degradation that's happening. And if we can somehow nurture those aspects in a way that's inclusive and not divisional, I think we'll see some huge change within the organizations as we move forward. Yeah. Very powerful.
I saw just on Facebook yesterday, somebody posted and they said, is there such a thing as work-life balance? And I responded and I said, no.
Oh.
And they were like, and I said, you know, for one thing, balance is 50-50, right? You know, I mean, my little head, that's the math.
You and me both. Yep.
Yeah. You know, and so that means, okay, you work for 50% of your time and you're personal for 50% of the time, but it doesn't work that way. You know, it all merges together. There is not a balance. You know, and I think that's one of the hard things for small business owners, because they don't quite understand, you know, and they try to have a balance. Oh, there's not a balance. I mean, you know, and especially if you're starting out, you're probably going to do more for your business, and you might do more for your business for years. But it's all about figuring out how to merge the things and make that quality time really be quality time.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's part of letting our lives ebb and flow. You know, that personification of work-life balance used to make me crazy, because I thought I was doing something wrong.
Right.
Again, it was a story, right? And if I'm loving working 900 hours a week,
what's
and
wrong
I'm
with
happy,
that?
there's nothing wrong with that. It's about that inner knowing and that inner happiness and honoring that. And for some people, it's they love it, and that's great, right? And for others, they may do it for a period in their lives and not do it for a while. Like the hardest thing for me was to go from 6 digits to 0 and then do nothing and actually sit still, because my head kept saying, you're not a productive, you're not
must
a
be
productive
doing, must be doing.
And I'm excited now to be doing again, but I'm doing it from a different space.
Right. Yeah. Well, speaking of that, oh my gosh, see, this is why I set a timer, because we are almost out of time. tell us more about what it is that you and your organization and Bill does.
Yeah, it's a great. In summary, what we do is we are leveraging advanced technologies to help stabilize the human energy field.
And we didn't even talk about that.
That's okay. It's hard to discover, but if you kind of look at it, if you look at science, the human form is an energy field. And when we experience, let's use this, a trauma, which we all have, right? It could be somebody as simple as, beating the crap out of somebody in a loving way. We tend to store that like muscle memory, and we don't even realize it. And so there's some very unique sciences coming out, typically sound-based, because they're bypassing the mind that wants to hold on to the fear. And what we do is we use some of those technologies to help us let go of the fear or the insecurities a little more easily, right? Which many of the coaching industries are doing in a very powerful way by having discussions and calling people out. But it can be done a little more easily if we leverage sound, which we do in our own unique way, to help us let go and get back to love is my language, because that's what we're born as, right? Babies don't come out thinking the world's an ugly place.
It's cold and bright, but
it's cold and bright, but mommy will hold me. But it's really about helping us let go a little more easily, and to strengthen some of the damage that I would call it that's been done over time. And I can say that confidently because I've lived it. The last 9 years, it's played a significant role. It is experimental in the case that it's not FDA approved or Health Canada approved and all that stuff yet. I can see that coming over time. But it is about strengthening our connection to ourselves. And it's a little bit esoteric in the sense that people aren't used to seeing that. But there are 2 individuals in our circle who are attending the Quantum University in Hawaii, who are studying science, that are starting to show that science and energy are really quite valid. And I see that changing over the next, several hundred years. This isn't an overnight thing. But it is different and it is leading age. And if it only ever helps me and nobody ever wants it, I'm okay with that. But I'm tremendously grateful for the instruments and technologies that have shown up in my life to just help me strengthen being more of me.
I love it. I love it. Well, if someone is interested in working with you and finding out more, how do they contact you?
So I would say a couple of ways. You can just simply go to loveevolution.ca and contact us through there. There is a page specifically about me, so meetann.ca, about some of my passions and craziness, and I'll post podcasts like this and others so you can get to know us. If there's a discussion, if the whole evolution of love part kind of turns you on in a strange and crazy way, we created a discussion forum called the Love Experiment.ca, where it's an off social media, not for right or wrong, just that way it's easier, where people can come together and explore what that means and ask questions and not feel like they're going to be judged by their questions. Because if you're judged, I'm kicking that person out anyway. But those are kind of the 3 main places
mean
that
girls.
You can come and put. No mean girls in my circle, or you can go, somewhere else. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Well, again, for all of those, it's .ca because it's a Canadian company, but loveevolution.ca, and just great information there. And I love that. We are done with time. We have to do this again. But until then, what final thoughts would you like to leave everyone with?
If it doesn't sound too nutty, it would be choose love. Choose love in each and every day, in whatever form that takes for you, especially in business.
I love it. I love it. Well, I have been having just an absolutely wonderful conversation with Ann Austin and Deb Creer. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.